G'day guys, welcome back. My name is Wildkard. Argentina versus England, round 3 Nations Championship. Boy, this was an emotional game. Obviously, it all started in soccer, right? Argentina eliminated England in the FIFA World Cup just a few days before this, and the English team was literally coming into town, like flipping off the fans and stuff in their bus as they were driving by the crowds in the cities of Argentina. And boy, and with all of that emotion, Argentina also showed up in this game with a tribute to Diego Maradona, with the light kind of like full colored blue top, light blue top, and the dark blue shorts instead of the traditional stripy top and the white shorts. And man, this was, this, you can feel that this was going to boil over at some point. Angus Gardner had an extremely tough game. The referee, he actually gave out like an early penalty to try to like stop players from escalating escalating into some sort of push and shove. So very early there was a penalty against England for running in after a try was scored, and then even with the early warning, the game was just constantly escalating, and the referee had to step in. So many different points to try to stop the players from breaking out into like all-out fight. Even at the end of the game, you looked at the referee was probably gonna get in some trouble. There was trainers coming in and holding players back. The Argentinians players felt they were a little bit hard done by this final decision here by the referee. Now, first of all, I do think this is not a try, right? The ball was grounded. In fact, I think the arms probably touched the line here. Even here, you can see the ball grounded, but the ball was grounded on the line and on the try line at the same time, on the sideline and try line at the same time. And this will constitute a out. The ball is out, so no try. That's the correct call. But most people will argue that there was a couple of potential seatbelt tackles. Seatbelt tackle meaning a wrap around the neck. Going into this try that should have resulted in a penalty for Argentina and should have given them another chance to play on to potentially get that bonus point, 2 bonus points, or one for losing, one for scoring 4 tries, and potentially even leveling the score. But yeah, Angus Gardner somehow, so the first one here looked like almost as could have been a seatbelt tackle, but the player didn't really put pressure onto it and kind of let go, which I think is fine. I think it's fine. He didn't quite, get his really sink into it, which I'm actually happy with this one. But this one here, Henry Slade came in crossed, definitely sunk in that seatbelt here. And the most important part is that he leveraged the neck of the ball carrier to push him out. Yeah, that is 100% not legal. You definitely cannot do that. Not only that, it's a seatbelt, but the whole move resulted in the players kind of, the whole move was crucial in terms of getting the player pushed out to deny this try. So I thought this should definitely be a penalty. He definitely sunk that in and used it, and I used a push on the neck to push the player out. So I think the Argentinians are rightfully a little bit upset on this decision. I do think that I don't understand why they just take another look at it. It looked like Angus Gardner was quite adamant that this wasn't okay. So yeah, I didn't really like that, but this was a really tough day for Angus Gardner overall. Now, I'd just like to go a little bit deeper in some of the decisions from Angus Gardner as well. So obviously there was a bit of criticism on Super Rugby referees in terms of how the law interpretation is a little bit looser than the rest of the world. It's not always the case, to be honest with you. There's some referees like Nick Berry that are looser. Some referees like Angus Gardner is actually tougher. He's actually extremely tough when it comes to some of the interpretations of the law. So I want to talk about 2 things. One is a deliberate knock-on, and second is a scrummaging. So first of all, let's look at scrum first. I'm actually surprised that England did this to try to angle in and just try to kind of push up the scrum from one side to get the penalty from boring in from the loose side, or maybe even try to. And in fact, Ellis Genja was asking the referee, did Argentinian tight head go into the hooker to his own hooker, resulting in the boring in from him? So he was trying to blame Argentina for the boring in, even though he was once doing it. This is something that I'm surprised that England Rugby didn't study this beforehand, before coming into this game, because Angus Gardner has one of the most strictest angling in interpretations in all the referees in the world. Even in Super Rugby, any sort of angle from the loose side gets pinned. Even if you go forward sometimes and you get the wheel from the loose side, he still calls it against the loose head. I've seen yellow cards being given. against the loose set for this as well. So I'm surprised that England even tried this at all. And then Angus Gardner was penalized Ellis Genji a number of times for elbow down and also angling in. So yeah, there it is, angling in and elbow down. I'm surprised that England tried this. And you know, I can see that you can get away with some referees saying that, hey, we are going forward, and then the fact that the scrum is angling in could be the fault of the tight head from the opposition going into our hooker. That should be penalty against us, but that's just not consistent with how Angus Gardner interprets this game. You got to play the referee sometimes. I think England didn't do that, and ironically, I thought it was really funny. Angus Gardner had this like coaching session with Genge. Basically told him to get his elbow up and square up, and as a result of that, the scrum looked better. The England scrum actually started to dominate as a result of what Angus Gardner said and start pushing straight and then getting that ascendancy. In fact, there was a pushover try as a result of just England dominance and best squaring up and going straight. There was no penalty for the pushover try because the scrum just went straight back and it didn't like wheel it or any way whatsoever. And then England just straight up got the walkover try with what's his name, Ben Earl putting his hand down when the ball was over the try line. So that was really nice to see. And ironically, I think Angus Gardner helped out the England scrum by giving them quite valuable instructions at how to keep their elbow up and keeping squared. And I thought that was a little bit funny. Also, there was another problem. Again, a couple of days ago, we saw Nick Berry basically not calling deliberate knock-ons at all in the All Blacks versus Ireland game. Or there was one deliberate knock-on caught against Tupaya reluctantly, but again, like the interpretation of the deliberate knock-on is supposed to be the way that Angus Gardner interprets it, and even in Super Rugby, this is how Angus Gardner interprets the deliberate knock-on. You've got to be in a reasonable expectation to regain possession after trying for the knock-on for that to be not a penalty. Now, I do think that there is I do think that the fact that it's just straight up a penalty, if the ball is knocked forward and they're in no position to regather it, I do think that there should be, or maybe there should be like somewhere between, like it's just because right now the way that the Angus Gardner was interpreting it, I think it's probably too far to the extreme. Like, yes, if the player disrupted the play, depends how bad it is, in my opinion, right? Obviously, you don't want the players to just be continuously abusing the deliberate knock-on to try to stop tries, right? If they actually stop the try, I think a yellow card, penalty try, should be given. But if it did something that didn't really affect a potential try, like the Carreras one, I think it was a Carreras right at the end, if it didn't affect the try, if it's just if the player, if it was just like if nothing, if it didn't really disrupt the try, if it didn't really affect the flow, I think it would just be a penalty. It's not a yellow card every time there's a deliberate knock on. I do think that there should be somewhere in between where where it's not a yellow, where it's illegal, but it's not quite enough to be a yellow card to where it didn't disrupt the try, but it's still definitely not a knock on because the player didn't make a genuine attempt to catch the ball. It's somewhere between the two where it's like it's definitely disruptive, but not to the extent that it's detriment to the game, where it's just a penalty. And obviously, if you're repeatedly giving out these penalties, you could be sent off as well, right? So it's not just like, I feel like there should be something in between. And I think Angus Gardner, there was a couple of those deliberate knock-ons, especially the one where Marcus Smith scored. The ball was thrown over the head, that touched the fingers and went to Marcus Smith, and he scored anyway. Especially ones like that. I think that should just be a penalty and not a yellow card. And then if he actually, if he actually disrupted Marcus Smith from scoring in that situation, then you can give him a yellow card and penalty try. So I do think that the deliberate knock-on is a fine line, and I can understand the way they interpret it because they don't want people to abuse it, right? And there was a lot of people talking about, oh, we should just stop giving away, just let players, get away with it. Because if you do that, let me tell you, there's just going to be deliberate knock-ons everywhere every time the ball gets into your opposition 22 just to stop you from scoring. And we definitely do not want that. But we definitely do not want, everybody just getting sent off every time they stuck their hand out accidentally or whatnot. And I do think that there should be like somewhere in between where it's kind of like it's a penalty, but you don't get sent off. But it's also not a penalty. Not, like what I mean. Like it's somewhere in between a penalty and and nothing, and just nothing at all. Just a genuine attempt somewhere in between. I think that'll be. I think the World Rugby should think about that. But anyway, let's go and talk about the two teams. Enough of the referee. I do think that both teams were pretty clunky. England had more periods where they're more consistent in terms of their attack. They did a really good job, England, of bringing Fai Womboso into the action. They had him a lot of times in almost like a center, crashing in the midfield. Short balls to him, like in the outside center, even though he's on the wing. So I think they did a great job of bringing. Did he actually play the wing? Did he actually? Because he looked like he was playing. Yeah, he's on the wing, but he looked like he was playing outside center for the most. Almost like he was playing outside center. The way he was coming into the middle of the field, and and he did exceptionally well this game, being able to punch through the England defense. The angles that he ran was really excellent, and that I thought was a huge point of difference for the two sides. In addition to that, England was a little bit better at the breakdowns, just to pressure both the opposition breakdown and then securing their own breakdown. So if you look at the breakdown in this game in comparison to the All Blacks versus Ireland game, the amount of players that's involved is like, there's just piles of bodies into every breakdown, whereas the Ireland New Zealand game, there's like hardly like one or two players, hardly any contest there. So it's big difference there. And then I think that England did a really good job of pressuring that and getting that secured for themselves. There were a little bit of kicking game. I thought it was interesting, little kick behinds and crossfields as well. They did a few attempts there, which was really nice there too. And also finally, there was a lot of discussions this game about whether or not Henry Pollock should be starting for England. Now, I do think that it's a better idea to have him coming off the bench, because I have watched him play in the final for the Premiership. I do think that he goes on periods, like periods where he's really good, and then he comes into slumps, and he has these periods where he's brilliant and periods where he's kind of just like slumping, and I do think that putting him on at an international test level for the full 80 minutes or maybe even 60 minutes, the slump, it's going to hurt the team more than the peaks. Whereas if you have him come on the bench, he's basically going to be just hitting one of those peaks in the last 20 minutes, hopefully. And you're just going to get the best out of him in a very short period of time. And I think that's the best way to work Henry Pollock in terms of just getting the most out of him in the most efficient manner. And also, England always had this problem where they kind of struggles to finish the game strong in the second half. Having someone like Henry Pollock come off just to give that extra bit of energy, I think is also like a much better idea to just have him start the game and try to, pretend that, the bench is going to work out with whatever they've got left. And I think, I do think that it's not a question of coaching somehow has something against him. I do think that this is just a better way to play him for the England side. But he did get a yellow card at the end of the game for repeated penalties from his teammates. But I do think that his impact off the bench was definitely felt when England regained that momentum from Argentina. Argentina for themselves, a lot of emotion aside, there was the attack looked very disorganized, to be honest with you. Like, you can see that the backline wasn't set up to kind of, it was kind of just like a splatter of players scattered around the field, and the ball was just kind of going like crash ball, and then occasionally they would try to throw it out wide, and there was a lot of hesitation, and even the try at the end, I felt like they could have probably scored a number of times because they were playing against 13 players, and how you don't have the space to score against 13 players, I do not know, because everybody was just drifting, no one was straightening up. Again, it's just disorganized. You kind of need a few players to straighten up, and then you go wide to get that space to present that space for the winger instead of getting pushed out like this against 13. So yeah, there was very disorganized from Argentinians. There were periods where they were really good, and then there were periods where they just a little bit low. But then again, the talk is that they have players coming from all over the world together, and they haven't spent much time organized as a team. So a little bit disappointing, but it is what it is. 24-31. and you just gotta keep improving and work out some of those problems. Scrum was a problem I think Argentina had as well, and then even I think the lineout was probably the best part for them, and even that wasn't that great. There were a few players that stepped up in the back line. Carrera's always had a good game, but always energetic. He got sent off, and also Dalgier was pretty energetic as well. But overall, I just felt like, yeah, maybe they did Chaco Barrios at 12. Maybe that's what's missing for Argentina in the back line. But even then, I felt like some of the four-pack players like Pablo Matera, is he even on the field? Or did he come off the bench? Some of these big impact players from Argentina just didn't quite hit the mark when they, especially in the four-pack in those tight areas of the breakdowns. So anyway, that's my assessment. Let me know your thoughts. Quickly go through the stats. 3 tries to 517 raw meters for Argentina, just 417 for England. 187 carries for Argentina for only 100 for England. 53 defenders beaten for Argentina. 31 defenders beaten for England. My goodness, wow, that's crazy numbers there. 11, I feel like I don't even know that's correct. 53 defenders beaten, really? 11 turnovers conceded for both teams. 122 tackles made for Argentina, 31 missed tackles. 275 tackles made for England, 53 missed. Really? Is that actually that bad for England? Because they were down to they had yellow cards or something. Is that why? But man, that's a lot of missed tackles. 23 kicks in play for Argentina, 25 for England. 2 missed conversions, 100% for Argentina's. 1 drop goal attempt from out of nowhere. 505 meters, kick meters for Argentina. 651 kick meters for England. Let's go to the lineouts. 13 lineouts for Argentina. 3 lost. 8 lineouts for England. 1 lost for themselves. No scrum losses. England did get some scrum penalties on their own feed, especially after some coaching from Mr. Angus Gardner. 6 penalties conceded for Argentina. 3 yellow cards. Yeah, there was just deliberate knock-ons. There was a high shot. It was just Angus Gardner was just sending out yellow cards like no tomorrow. England as well. Deliberate knock-on, I think there was. And then just yellow cards for repeated penalties. Backing up on each other. There was a penalty try as well for deliberate knock-on in front of the goal line. Boy, it was crazy amount of yellow cards. Despite that, Argentina only gave away 6 penalties overall, and England 14 penalties given out. That is absolutely crazy. And just before the end of the game as well, I don't know what's going on with the Argentinians, brain trust. They were playing against 13 players for about 10 minutes. They could have definitely scored 2 tries in 10 minutes, but instead of just tap and go, they kept on going for the scrum. And I know they had a 1 player advantage in the scrum, but England were just happy to run the scrum down, collapsing, standing up, and then just wasting time. And there was so much time wasted in the scrummaging for Argentina did it themselves. I really don't understand why they did that. They could have just tapped and go and just literally could have just done anything else and preserved the time, because the time was more precious than everything else they've got. I understand the logic, but you were running out of time. You didn't have the time to get the penalty before you build for a try. And yeah, it was just crazy how many scrums that Argentina won, despite it was clearly playing against them. Not sure that was the right decision. But anyway, let's do a quick recap of all the tries. So 4 minutes in, there was a penalty advantage for England. There was a nice crossfield kick, a clean take from Freeman, who ran in for the first try. Finn Smith did this crossfield. 5 points to 0. There was a bit of push and shove, an early warming, and a penalty for the referee for a kickoff for Argentina. After this, 23 minutes in the game, England again using final Bosu really nicely, breaking through left and right, and eventually ran a nice little underline. He broke through, and then a nice little offload to Ben Earl went in for the try. 12 points to 0 for England. There was a yellow card after this against Carreras for a high tackle, head on head. 28 minutes in the game, there was not a penalty. There was a penalty for Argentina, and they're taking the 3 because they haven't had any momentum at all. 3 points to 12, and then immediately after this 3 was taken, England had a penalty. Had a scrum. It had a build into the Argentina 22 in 5 meters out, and then there was a 5-meter scrum for England, and England just pushed the scrum in for the pushover try. 19 points to 3, England lead at half time. 42 minutes in the second half, Argentina came out, they went for the penalty. They got a penalty early on, went for the more, and then the more was slow moving, and then the backs joined in, and eventually there was a crash ball for the number 9, and then Carreras quickly picked up and crashed over as well. 10 points to 19. After this, Van Poortvliet was sent off for a deliberate knock on, and then the Van Poortvliet was sent off for deliberate knock on, and then a few minutes later, Argentina was building. There was like a little line break through to the middle of the field. It got really close to the try line. The player tried to pop the ball off the ground, and it was deliberately knocked on again as the ball was popped off the ground. And this was a penalty try. So 17 points. 17-19, and Argentina was playing against 13 players at this point. Despite that, England was actually able to get a grip and stay in control, putting some pressure themselves. 61 minutes, despite having players in the bin. There was not a yellow card for a clean out against Argentina for landing on the English player's leg on the 60th minute. So Argentina went down a player before England could, and then England came back with, I don't know, anyway, there was a bunch of yellow cards being sent out. I think at the 61 minutes, I think this was 14 against 14. England just spun the ball out to one hand of the field, and then went back to the other side, just, using the full width of the field. They were building into the 22, and eventually, got really close to the try line, and Van Poortvliet threw a long pass over the top to Marcus Smith, and Carreras touched the ball as he was throwing it over. I thought this should have just been a penalty because it didn't disrupt the try. And if he actually disrupt the try, penalty try, I guess. But anyway, referee says that's a yellow card as well. And also Marcus Smith following this, so 17 points to 26. And suddenly, Argentina went from playing against 13 players to down to 13 players, and England's back to 15. So with this period, with England's back to 15, there was, a lot more pressure from the England side. There was a line out from Argentina that was stolen, that was lost to England, and then there was a nice little midfield play where Faye Boso, there was a nice crash field midfield, and then they just quickly, instead of coming back to open side, they quickly sent it down to the blind side where Faye Boso ran down. There was a bunch of players that could have tackled him, but the defense was disconnected, so Faye Boso just wiggles through a couple of Argentinian players and scored under the post. 31 points to 17. Argentina is down by quite a bit at this point. 73 minutes. There was a yellow card against England. Argentina starting building more pressure. Henry Pollock got sent off. Argentina coached for a scrum with a play in the bin, but England was happy to just let you run down the clock. A few minutes later, it was another yellow card for repeated penalties against England, and then 17 got sent off, and then still Argentina went for another scrum, and again, it's just Argentina not really understanding the time, but eventually England was able to defend this. They got themselves out of trouble, and then Argentina had a midfield kind of play way out, and it just ran straight through. Picardo just cut through middle of the field and just immediately went for the try because obviously they're playing against 13 players. 24 points to 31. And then finally, there was a play against 13 players. Argentina was building from inside their own 22 all the way to this point where they almost looked like they scored. And there should have been a penalty, but referee said, no chance. Game over. Argentina. Disappointing finish, but man, this was just a crazy, crazy game. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.